happy to be here with my friend Welin. Welin and I have known each other for the past 10 years. She's taking me on many adventures in Sarawak, so it was very natural, Welin, that you would be one of my first guests in those series. You're now heading the Center for Malaysian Indigenous Studies attached to University Malaya, and you received a high-impact grant to conduct research on the Pakumbu in Sarawak with the Iban community. You've also studied in Germany, Australia. You were married to a Frenchman. You're often invited as a speaker to conferences and symposium all over the world. And on top of that, you've really spent quite some time also researching questions of identities and cultures in Sarawak. So you have a wealth of academic and personal experience. My second guest today is Alexis van Ulak.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Right.
Thank you, Marie.
So Alexis is one of the director of the French Chamber of Commerce in Malaysia, based in Sarawak. You were also raised in two different cultures. French by your mother, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, yes.
And Kenya in Sarawak by your dad. You work mostly in the financial and oil and gas industry, and hence I look forward to having your perspective as well, both personal and professional today. And last, I would like to welcome Valerie Mashman. Valerie is British. She also has this, which seems to be the feature today, of a multicultural family. British, married to a Kalabit husband, and Valerie's been in Sarawak for the past 40 years. And you are an associate research fellow with the Institute of Borneo Studies with UNIMAS in Kuching. So it will be very interesting to have your views as an outsider to what Welin and Alexis are going to share.
If I would be overseas, I would of course see myself as Malaysian. But when you meet somebody from Malaysian overseas, you say, hey, I'm Sarawakian, you know. But if you meet another Sarawakian overseas, straight away you will ask, what are you? You know, are you Iban? Are you Bidayu? Are you Orang Ulu? You know, all these kind of questions. We see. I don't want to use the word we, because I don't know if I am representing the majority of the Sarawakians in the conversation, but I would speak from my own experience. I see myself as always as a Bidayu wherever I go, you know, like I always correct other people, like if they say I am coming from a different ethnic group, I will straight away correct, say, no, I'm a Bidayu, I'm not this. So I'm very patriotic to which ethnic group I'm coming from.
I have to agree with Welin. I think the East Malaysian Sarawakians are within their own community. I think they're very proud of their ethnic background. So there are differences between the various different groups, whether you're Iban, your Penan, your Klabit, your Kenya, Kayan. They all have a different feel to them, and I would say patriotic, but you know, proud, I guess, of their heritage. And the way I see it, East Malaysians tend to be very friendly, very open to foreigners. You know, Sarawak has always been open to Europeans. In the past, we were under the Brooks, so there's always been that foreign or British, or basically foreign entity or group within Sarawak. So whilst I agree that the Sarawakians tend to be very friendly, I also agree with Welin saying that the different Sarawakian groups or ethnic groups are quite proud of their heritage, really. From the business point of view, because I'm with the chamber itself, Sarawak is viewed as, I guess, a lot of potential to be tapped there. As far as business is concerned, there is a push by the state government to help and provide the infrastructure for growth. Sarawak is very open to development.
I agree with Alexi. I think most Sarawakians almost have the same view about how do we see ourselves, how do we present ourselves, and I think I saw how people view us based on the menti.com to say that we are proud of our culture. We are like independent. I think all those elements are true about us. I'm not quite sure about laid back though. I have to disagree with that because we embrace each other differences, and you're hardly able to say who's the Iban, who's the Bidayu, who's the Orang Ulu. I mean, if you look at the picture that that Marie put on the first page, I mean, me and Alexi almost have the same haircut and the same face shape, all these kind of things. So people cannot differentiate us, and we are very accepting in the sense that we only see the difference. We only see ourselves as different when people started to mention the difference. Like I give you the experience working at University Malaya. I never thought that I'm different from any one of them because I have the same level of education. I have the same level of English speaking, for example. And I think my friend Patricia Nora also agree with me because she's also teaching at University of Malaya. But the way people see us as different, that make us feel that we are different, if you know what I mean. I mean, we do not touch the boundaries of differences until people mention it to us. I mean, just imagine, back in 1994, I still remember, I was in a taxi and this taxi driver said to me, where are you from? Are you Filipino? I said, no, I'm Sarawakian. And he said, oh, welcome to Malaysia. You know, at the first point when you landed, the Peninsula people, not even in a corporate, the Peninsula people say that you are different from them. I said, is Sarawak not in Malaysia? And 2 years ago, in KLIA, I had the same questions. I had the same comment. Welcome to Malaysia. So that gives me a question. What have we done to the history classes? So this kind of very strong perceptions of that we are different from others that make us think ourselves as very different. And that actually enhanced my desire to have this very strong ethnic identity, just to say, okay, if you think I'm different, then that's it.
So I don't know, Alexis, if that's something you've encountered, but often talking to people from Sabah and Sarawak, there's something that seems to annoy you a lot. It's how other people see you. They tend to say, what people think they know about Sarawakian, and the sense that speaking on behalf of people from Sabah and Sarawak. So what do you think about that? Is it something you've been confronted to, and how do you react to this?
I think from my background, right? I mean, I'm my mother's European, my father's Kenyah Dayak. So in Sarawak, it's if anybody sees me, they would say, oh, you're a foreigner, Orang Putih, right? So likewise in Peninsular Malaysia. So my physical appearance looks more European than the local Sarawakian. So I get that anyway. It's not different. But within people that I do know, I mean, it's or once they know that I'm Sarawakian, it's more of trying to understand. Okay, which ethnic group are you from? They would understand, okay, yeah, you're from the northern part of Sarawak, from the Baram, and various different people from that side, and what the ethnic groups around that area are. So you do have that difference between north and south of Sarawak. You don't get very many Bidayus up in the northern part in Miri, because they're predominantly around the Kuching area. Valerie, what are your thoughts?
Well, no, just the fallacy is that there are lots of Bidayu in Miri.
Okay.
Probably there are more Bidayu in Miri than there are in Syria, for example.
I have to agree.
I'm perhaps exaggerating here, but you think you can place people in a village, but then of course everything defies that, because people are mixed, and a lot of my children's friends don't necessarily want to be pigeonholed. I think very racist if I'm trying to place people into a certain box. So I have to be very careful sometimes with my children's friends if I'm asking where they're from. My son will say he's Malaysian. He doesn't really want to say whether he's Kalabit or he feels half Kalabit, half English. And I think there is a lot more mixing that's going on that sometimes defies this desire of, say, Wei Lin is very strong about her Bidayu identity. My daughter will have a very strong Kalabit identity. But then going against that, there are a lot of things that defy that when you see how mixed up people are in cities, and their parents are mixed, and there's a lot more else going on, and it's a lot more complex.
That's the word for Sarawak, the complexity, and that's what puzzled me in trying to organize and draft questions for this session, because of that diversity and that notion of identity. It's something, Welin, that you have done quite a lot of work on. What is the best way to understand that diversity, and as a non-Sarawakian, what is the best approach to have to this diversity?
Even I find it difficult to understand how to understand my own people. I don't make it easy, am I? Well, I think like you should not see us different, just like we are one of Malaysians. I do not think that we are outstandingly different. So, okay, but I heard a lot of people saying that they feel very different when they come to Kuching. They feel that people are more friendly, and people say hello on the street, people smile, which you don't get in Kuala Lumpur. But I guess when you come to Sarawak, or if you work with your colleague from Sarawak, you just have to think them as one of your colleagues. You want to know more about Sarawak? You have been my friend for the past 10 years. I mean, that is the best and the easiest approach. We are very hardcore shielded from feeling negative, I think. Is that right, Alexi? We don't get offended very easily.
No, I think Sarawakians as a whole are very open and very friendly,
Yes.
right? So, how do you want to get to know Sarawakians? You spend time with them, talk to them, and just like anybody else, actually. I don't.
One thing that you have to be very aware of, when you're in mixed groups, it's quite possible that there might be 3 Bidayus who haven't met one another for a long time, and they'll jabber away in their own language, quite oblivious that you don't understand, and you'd like to know more about the conversation. Or there might be some Chinese at the same table with you and part of your group, and they'll be talking away in Hakka or whatever dialect. And in a European context, I would think it very rude, if we're out together in a group, but people are breaking away into their own mother tongues because they gel or they bond better, and that you feel excluded. So in my own workplace, I had to, well, I was running an English language school for many years. I had to say, look, please speak English in the office. In the staff room, we speak English. In these areas, we speak English. Because some people will feel excluded if you don't. So I had one Indian lady in the office, and she'd feel excluded because the Chinese would be all speaking Chinese. And similarly now there's one Kalabit girl and another Kalabit girl has joined, and I said, please don't speak Kalabit in the office, because it will look as if you're talking about others, or others will feel excluded. So I had to work to create this English-only culture, but that was appropriate because it's an English language centre.
Yes.
But you do have this thing where to locals it doesn't seem rude if you're talking in front of them in languages that you don't understand.
You do have a lot of Sarawakian working also in Peninsular Malaysia. They tend to go under the radar and blending in. And it's a little bit what you've been sharing since the beginning of our talk. It's just we're just like everyone, and we just want to fit in.
I was just about to say, the feedback I get from people, from the business side, is that they find it easier to meet people here, get an appointment to see somebody here. It could be the fact that, we're not as busy or a little bit more laid back in Sarawak, but it's easier to meet up with people. I guess, in KL, you probably have to factor in the large amount of time to get from one place to the other, but people tend to be quite open here. You want to come see me in the office, no problem, we'll meet up immediately. Whereas I guess in Peninsular Malaysia or in KL, everybody seems to be a lot busier and maybe less approachable is not the right way to say it, but I think more busy. So it's a little bit more difficult to get an appointment to see somebody in KL, and it's a lot easier in Sarawak. So I feel that, or at least the feedback that I've got from people is that people in Sarawak tend to be a lot more approachable, and even in government departments, you want to see somebody, it's normally not too difficult to actually approach them.
Okay, and growing up then, Alexis, where did you see the biggest difference between your French side of the culture and the Kenya?
For me, you have, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of knowledge, especially oral knowledge, which is passed on generations in my father's tribe, basically. So it is very different from French. French, you've got hundreds of years of history or thousands of years of history. You can pick up books and read about it. Whereas it's not as detailed in the Kenya culture. You listen to stories, you listen to songs. So it's very different. You have to probably put a lot more effort to find out more about the culture and the Kenya culture where I'm from. It's not as easy to pick up a book and understand the culture and the nuances with the language, whereas it's covered in and written about in the French books, basically.
That's interesting. Do you think that has an impact on how people actually then behave at work? Because the skills that you will be developing will be very different than in both cultures. I suppose in the Kenya culture, you have to be more maybe mindful, develop more your listening skills than you might in the French culture.
I think in all business, in all environments, you have to listen carefully, right? If you want to be a leader, you want to be the top of the company, you want to direct people, you have to listen as well as to learn from your experiences to make decisions to direct the company or to direct people. A leader in a community, in the Kenya community, you become the head of the village, then you become the head of the you go up the different levels of, Pamancha, Temongong. Those are the different status or power which you have to over different longhouses, over different areas.
How the skills you need as you grow up, you'll probably be more, you will master those faster when you need them in the workplace.
I left coaching when I was 19, so there's not much of a Sarawak values. If there is differences between what I've learned when I'm outside of Sarawak, and I never really worked in Sarawak, so I can't really say a lot about my experience in coaching. I have been told by my students, especially my adult students, for my PhDs, supervisions. Usually we have 2 supervisors, and it's always towards the first semester, the student will request to drop one of the supervisors, and guess who they would drop? The other one, not me. Yeah? And I always ask them, why do you want to work with me? And they always say that I'm very approachable, and I explain things in detail, and I'm very nurturing. So I guess that is our common characters as a human being, But sometimes it makes me think: is this really cultural behavior that I'm bringing out, or it's just a personal, individual character? So I still remember what my grandmother said. You see, we always go back to our grandparents, what they say, the wise words and the wisdom that they pass down. Like, I think in my community, one of the best values that I've learned is trust and be kind to others. But I think this is a very global and universal human values. Like Alexi was saying, that we all should be kind to others, and if you want to become a leader, then you should be the leader that everybody likes to work with, not a leader that people are scared of, but a respected one. My first lesson that I learned from my grandfather, I was 12. Okay, he owns a shotgun. I think for some hunters in Sarawak, a shotgun is very, very valuable. And my grandfather would never allow anyone to touch the shotguns. So that's how I learned about the word trust. And I was even allowed to shoot flying fox at the age of 12 with that shotguns. So, and I learned to grow with this kind of word trust, because even my father, he always emphasized the word trust. If you don't trust a person to do this, I would rather do it myself, That is always the word that he used as I grow up in my family. So I think it's also the family values which has been imposed to me and my siblings. It's always around the word trust. If I trust you to do this, and you do not perform, then I will never ask you again. So I carry this with me in my work ethics. I'm so proud to say this, that she said that I'm very easy to work with, like very flexible. I hope that was true, Cam. I'm very flexible, and even though I live in KL with all these traffic jams and those kind of stuff, but because I've been trained in a few different cultures, I spent a lot of numbers of years in Germany, and I learned about punctuality. Okay, sometimes we Sarawakians, we are a bit laid back on the time. I know this for sure, because I always have my students from Sarawak always late, 15 minutes, half an hour late, coming to lectures. So I said, this must not be a Sarawakian attitude. I said, because we are supposed to follow what our old traditional ways, to say that if we want to hunt a wild boar, for example, you have to be there half an hour before the wild boar came, after you track your tracks, you know. So this kind of values has not been imposed to our new younger generation. So even if I speak about how I view myself as Sarawakian, it will not apply to our next generations, because the way we grow up is very different. It's our social environment that actually shape us the way we are. I'm different because I used to live in a long house, and co-housing, living in the long house, give you a very different perspective of life. You have these values that you learn about knowledge sharing. You share food. You do things as a team. You are not individualistic. You share your things with other children. You share your space with other people. You know, but having the long house being demolished and started to live in individual house, we started to become very individual. We used to just jump on other people's, our uncles, our aunties' house and have coffee. If they eat, we just eat together. Now we actually have to text them, "Are you at home?" You know. I mean, the city life has crept into the village life now with all these gadgets and everything. So I would like to pose a question. What actually, not who, but what actually changed us as a person? It doesn't matter from which ethnic group you're coming from, but it is actually what around us has changed our values, you know. So I do think this kind of conversation is very important, but sometimes it just emphasizes the differences. That's how I mean. I'm truly all the way to say that we are not different from anyone.
But that I do strongly believe that we can all. It's about taking the best from different groups. I like what you shared, Waylin, about that sense of community, which is more than words, but you really experience.
Some people might perceive Sarawak as being, not as advanced or not as savvy. And I think if you come into any engagement with anybody with that mindset, I think it'd be very tough to actually gain the trust. So I think for you to gain trust, you got to be genuine in the way you deal with them, the way you ask for things.
Valerie, what did you experience coming here? Because I believe you had to make yourself accepted. What would you highlight in terms of what is needed to build trust and respect?
I'm thinking more of my own professional experiences as a teacher. My mother's Italian, which might explain something more. But I suppose to engage with my students, I tend to act, I tend to shout, I tend to speak loudly, especially in the early days when you have 40 or 50 in the class. And I thought it was my way of engaging, because that's the way I did it. And that's the way I got along. That's the way I got people to stay awake. But then I realized also from my husband's side that you spoke softly. A person to be respected is somebody who holds back in conversation, who speaks softly. Sometimes in a multi-ethnic situation, as my husband would share with you, he'd say he might miss out because there were other people who would talk loudly and show off and tell you how well they're doing. But within his culture and his frame of reference, you talk softly and you hold back, because that's the way you're respected within his ethnic group.
I think we listen to less and less to older people, you know, and that is one of the key that hold us in the past. We listen to the elders. We listen to the old people in our longhouse, in our village. But now we seek advice less and less from the old ones. We always, I think most of us now, like especially those who have go quite far from our traditional communal bond, we think that old people doesn't know anything, you know, because we live in a very different world. Yeah, but I remember that in the past, like I'm not young, so I can see that I have seen the past. My grandparents, you know, like everything they ask from the old people, they ask from the leader in the village. Once upon a time ago, our leader was a very knowledgeable person in terms of rule guidelines and also in terms of ethics, in terms of taboos and all these kind of things before they were Christians. And now that has all gone. I mean, this is my observations on the many villages that I have visited during my research. So there's nothing much about the leader, the current leader of village, of Longhouse that we can really point out that is the leader that we want. You know, I don't want to get into politics because it's totally a different scene. I mean, I don't want to speak about the political parties and all this kind of thing because I think it is very complicated to understand now with all this backdoor government and everything. So I might as well leave that out. But I think I give you one example. Yeah, when we speak about leadership for the community, I'm not speaking about political parties, but at the village level, and also the position of orang kaya pemancar, for example. I do not think you know what is orang kaya pemancar. Okay, in the Sarawak structure, you have the head of the village, and then you have and then there is a chief of the heads of the village, which is called orang kaya pemancar. So this is the position which has been inherited since the British time, I think, because my great-grandfather was orang kaya pemancar. And I still remember when he speaks, everybody listens. When he strategized development for the village, everybody listens. Everybody would play and contribute, you know. But the recent one, I see that people say, oh, he's been appointed because it was just government appointment, you know. So that really show the differences. So there is a leader, but people don't trust them because they are not the leader that the people has suggested. You see, so I cannot really say trust, respect is very important. It is very important, but it does not match to the way we choose our leader
Today.
Yeah. What do you think, Alexi?
Well, I actually wasn't going to look at that from that point of that angle. Actually, I was trying to figure out Marie's questions earlier on. You know, you're talking about the different ethnic groups. Traditionally, if you look back on the different ethnic groups in Sarawak, you have certain groups who are a lot more savvy as far as raising or in agriculture, you know, having farms, having livestock, etc. Or you have those who are hunter-gatherers, like for example the Penans. You know, they are incredible hunters and they know the jungle extremely well. And but they don't stay in one place for too long. They move around. So that I think historically you have those differentiation, similar to, you know, if you look at Australia and New Zealand, you know, the Maoris versus the Aboriginals there. They, you know, very different cultures. One's more aggressive, the other one's a lot more, you know, living with the land, etc. And I believe we have that in Sarawak. Or we had that, you know, we have the headhunters. Then you also have the more peaceful hunter-gatherers, Penans. And the level of education has obviously, there's a big gap there because certain areas were developed a lot more. But now I believe, you know, what Valerie is saying, that, you know, there's so much mixture going on. There's so much integration. You had those differences in the past. I think there's a there's a lot less now with so much intermarriage, changes in the structure of the various different groups, ethnic groups. These days, it's more about what your experience are, especially the younger groups, you know, where you're educated and experience in working with, a lot of them have experience in working with international companies, etc. So, you know, you do have the experiences there. So it's not, you can't turn around and say, you know, this ethnic group is very much underdeveloped. I think that there's a lot more opportunities for everybody these days.
I was reading recently a biographical piece about one of Alexis's ancestors, the late Temungong Oyong Lawai Chao, who was a phenomenal man. He was considered a statesman compared to Churchill. And one of the things they said about leadership, and in the context of the Temungong, he would always think about something very carefully and ask the opinions of other people around him before making a strong decision. And you hear about leadership in villages in Sarawak where the traditional leader is surrounded by a council of elders. And I think that idea of making sure you found out what other people think before making a decision is something which would be very much appreciated. That you're building on consensus of other strong people around you before you make a momentous decision.
Well, we still have contact with our other distant relatives through my grandparents in the 80s, I remember, but it was the last time I have in my memory that we have contact. But and for our generation, personally, we see Kalimantan as the other country. There is no strong connections. I mean, we love the Borders Market in Serikin. We always go there, but there is no personal or family connections, which is, you know, existing. Yeah, because I think the Bidayu at the border, they have quite a close relationship with another Bidayu who don't speak the same dialect in the other side of the border. I mean, we have visited by our distant relatives from my grandmother's side. I think in the early 1990s, that was the last one, but we do not relate to them as we do not know them. I don't even feel that they are connected with me, you know, because we don't know them. They are from Indonesia. We always think that they are from Indonesia.
I have to agree with Welin there. They are, as far as the Kenyah people are concerned, there are greater numbers in Indonesia on the Kalimantan side. You can actually trace back the language, one of the Kenyah dialects back to a common dialect for both sides. But now, you know, we still consider ourselves as Malaysian as opposed to Indonesian, even though ethnically, yes, you do have Kenyas on the other side of the border. But it's a very difficult border for us to cross physically. And as far as interactions, I'm not too sure how strong that is. But based on my personal interactions, there's literally we hear stories about, you know, where the Kenyah came from and how they moved across and etc. So apart from that, now they're very separate, but still recognize each other.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's very interesting because meaning that Malaysia really creates something, and even if you are from indigenous indigenous roots, the Malaysian feeling is more important. Thank you.
I think
That's
if you would ask my grandfather, he would have a different opinion. Sure, but not our generation. Yeah.
It's about the experience of colonialism, whether you think that has impacted or differentiated like the way people in Sarawak look towards like specifically white foreigners.
If I were to take this, well, the first part of the question at least, I believe that there is a long history with colonialism. I mean, we have the Brooks here before, so it's accepted, and there has been a lot of intermarriage. You still have a lot of people here who have English names to the back, whether it's adopting the name or actually being have a bloodline from the English. It's you know, you have both of them, and I think that it's also because of the diversity. While you have if you look at the indigenous groups, inverted comma, you have so many of them. You know, you have I think in excess of 40. Welin, please help me out there. I think so. You're used to foreigners per se. Maybe they're not white; they're the same color as you are, but because of the Rajas before the Brooks, that history of interacting or living in harmony with foreigners has been there. Whether it's, as I said, you know, whether it's white foreigners or Chinese. You know, you have Chinese traders who've been here for the longest time ever. So, you know, we don't see it as an ethnic. You know, we don't try and separate it out.
Well, I'd say that I've always found it very easy to be a white person here. Probably easier than being an English person in Italy, strangely enough, who speaks Italian. I probably found it much easier, many ways very easy. And there is this kind of perhaps a nostalgic and over-romanticized view of the Brooke regime and the colonial period that perhaps hasn't really been historically reassessed because people don't really study history, nor do they really assess history academically at universities or schools. And if they were to do that, perhaps they might have a different view. But there is this sort of very misty-eyed view of the Brooke regime. So, yes, people are open to you. And in the education line, it's been very easy for me as an English teacher, that I'll say. Yeah. I
must say, when I look at my father's stories, I listen to my father's stories, okay? I always like to listen to older people's stories who have experienced the colonial schools, mission schools, because it really gives you the perspectives how different we look at, you know, this different gap of generations. My father is 70 this year, and he has been to mission schools, and he was sponsored by a padre, for example, and he got his name, Jeffrey, from the priest who actually take care of him when he did his study in St. Thomas School in Cochin. And just so happened that priest's name is like Llewellyn. So you see, my name is Llewellyn. So that how much they embrace this heritage, you know. I would say heritage because whatever that shaped my father's generation is coming from the influence of colonialism, you know, mission schools, Christianity. So it's becoming part of life. But we learn about all this history from textbooks, and it's not even all of it has been taught in school. For example, like James Brooks' work in Sarawak. I like to say work, not invention, or not him become the white king, because like if you read throughout the history of the Brooke family, it's very, very interesting and a little bit complicated, because there is the bad side of colonialism, but there is also a good side of colonialism. I think as Sarawakians, we very much embracing the good side of colonialism in terms of education. I can't say much about religion, but everybody seems to willing to abandon their spiritual traditional belief to embrace this new religion called Christianity. If you go to Sarawak nowadays, you hardly find any community or individuals who are not Christians, who are not Muslim, you know. And then there is certainly now at current time there is a small movement to gain back that originality, or whatever you call it, traditional spiritual. I think I would like to give an example. Like in previous years, you do not see people like patriotically wearing their costume to go to official public events. You wear batik or you wear suit, and then you have some prayers. But now among the Iban, for example, I witnessed this when I was in Cebu, when I was in Miri, and when I was in Sri Aman. You know, they started events with a miring. It used to be baca doa, or it used to be like a Christian way of praying, you know. But now, since the past 5 years, I've seen this. They started with miring. Okay, so what does that mean? You know, it's always a question which I'm asking myself. And then names, for example, okay, in the 60s and 70s, these generations, they love to embrace English names. But now, a lot of my friends who are from this generation, they even create a Bidayu name for their children. You know, like a name I have never heard of. So it's a kind of invention of identity. So I'm asking myself, what's actually going on? What is a Bidayu means? You know, I actually wrote a paper which I never finished because I could never finish it. Like, who am I as a Bidayu? I was trying to find the criteria. Like I was trying to find at least the Orang Ulu, for example, you still have this very strong identity in terms of your material culture. Yeah, you can see it straight away that it's Orang Ulu, even though you cannot really differentiate between Kenyah, Kayan, or Kelabit unless they speak the language. Like we are embracing this multi-ethnicity, multi-diversity. But that paper I wrote back in 2010, for 10 years now, I could never finish that paper. I cannot pinch out what makes me Bidayu. How can people see me as Bidayu if I stand among all these other people who do not know my ethnic origins?
But that's kind of closing the circle. To close this conversation, I'm just going to ask you, each of you, 3 tips that you would give to anyone who wants to come and work in Sarawak.
I'll say if you're going to come and employ be in a Sarawakian workplace, I think you need to be very broad-minded, very easygoing, very flexible. One thing, you have to be aware that people's families are very important. So I was running a language school. Time is very important. People being punctual is very, very important. And I had 1 or 2 run-ins because certain people had funerals that went on for more than 2 days, or people were late for work and classes were late because somebody had to send their mother somewhere else first. And these were problematic, these were problems, but I never understood the problems at the time. It was only a lot later that I really understood what was going on.
I would add maybe be patient. Patience would be a good one to have, and not try lose your temper. I think to be calm as much as possible. But I guess that's in every single environment, isn't it?
Wei-Lin, le mot de la fin, as we say in French.
I just want to add one thing. Okay, because this is just from the observations. Even I myself, every time when I go for my research in different fields, they don't see me as, they see me as a Sarawakian, but as an outsider. You know, like they do certain things certain way, which is different. So I tend to ask questions. Why do you do this thing this way? And all they said, if you want to be friends with us, you don't ask. You know, just get on with it. Just follow what we do. So I guess there is a proverbs, Malay proverb say, if you go, I cannot translate it. You know, if you go to if you want to make friend with a sheep, you have to make the same sound as they are. You know, so you don't question. I think this tip is very useful because, like, I try not to question too many things when I go for my field side, and I've been accepted so nicely. You know, they don't question me. But I think one of the things that you might find quite unusual, which I find quite unusual, is that the Sarawakian embrace you like a family member once they get to know your family members. I still remember at the time when I went to the Longhouse, when I came as a researcher, I tried to become the anthropologist, you know, but it didn't work. So the second trip, I actually brought my 2-year-old daughter, and it truly revealed myself as a Sarawakian, as a Bidayu, as a mother, you know. And then everybody was babysitting my 2-year-old daughter, and that makes my life so easy during the 4 weeks of research at the Longhouse. And they really embraced me as one of theirs. And that's how I got adopted in every Longhouse that I go, you know. So you just embrace their way. I guess in many different cultures, we have to do the same. We should not impose our way to the culture that we are entering. Even for Sarawakians, even like if I go to the Klabit Longhouse, for example, I went to Barrio for Christmas 2 years ago. I just let myself to be Klabit temporarily, you know, and you'll be accepted. I went to Iban Longhouse. I become Iban temporarily. I went to my family in Sungai Asap among the Kenya. I become them. So there is no boundaries. So it's just your willingness to accept. I think globally we have conflicts because we don't want to accept. You know?
We don't want to let go. Well, that's a
Yeah,
very nice
exactly.
conclusion, Wei-Lin, to this conversation of accepting others and not asking too many questions and just becoming, learning what other people are all about. Thank you, Valerie, for your views. Thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Wei-Lin.